in my mind, they are all inclusive of the same event, and that event is the Grand Prix. Now, I'm not saying that's how it was legally interpreted, because obviously you've said that legally they were two separate events, but I would think the concert and the race were all part of the Grand Prix experience in the one event.
Katy Perry is going to be performing at the AFL Grand Final. It is the most Australian sport that we have, and they've got Katy Perry coming in. I don't know how much they're paying her, but she's 39 years old. No shade, but she's definitely not at the height of her influence either. I just thought it was very curious. Why is Katy Perry playing it?
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
We can run a test recording. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll just start recording though.
Okay.
No testing done at all here at Homebrewed, just straight into it.
Straight into it. That's why we always have gleaning perfect tech results. 3, 2.
Oh, you're seeing that too? I wasn't sure whether you saw that or not. So we are now recording.
That's good.
As it should be. Anyway.
That's good. Okay. Yeah, we're learning and we're growing together with this.
We are. How was your day? I haven't really spoken to you today.
Honestly, it was all right. I was just at work. Work was okay, except for the fact I've had this sickness. Don't know what it is. Going on 1 week. This is unheard of in Eamonn's world. This is I am rattled. I'm usually like a 2 days maximum. Like COVID, 2 days, barely felt sick, like any sickness usually is come and gone within 2 days. And this thing is just changing form, changing shapes. So forgive me if I sound a bit crap or I start coughing or something like that, because like today it's like manifested this weird ear thing. And then I just feel kind of like dizzy a lot. I think it's sinus related and it's like throwing my balance out slightly. It's really strange.
This is now 2 out of the last 3 podcasts where we've had to do some sort of apologies in advance for potentially coughing or sneezing or a sore throat, sort of crackly voice type of scenario.
Yeah. There's something in the air. So I'm just, like in the throes of this man flu and being very vocal about it. So that's me. But otherwise, I'm pretty good. And how about yours?
Not too bad. I'm a little bit sore. I've recently joined a gym and trying to get back into the fitness stuff. So I'm about a week and a bit in. So I'm, still a little bit sore.
And without naming said gym, how have you gone with the being relentlessly hassled by the gym thing?
It was annoying.
Yeah, for those listening, I haven't done this, but my partner, she tried to join a gym a few years ago, and like she's not really just a gym person. That kind of regimented go to the gym thing isn't her, and as a result, kind of didn't work out, and so that she tried to, I think, just get out of it or whatever, and the hassling both from the gym for her firstly to return, and then the barriers that were put in place for you to be able to actually move this membership on one way or another, I was staggered by. It was like you needed to seek a high court injunction on your contract with the gym to stop paying them like the $20 a week or $20 a month or whatever it was. It was insane. So Cam, when you told me about your experience the other week and they were already smashing you with the phone calls, I thought, oh no.
It was endless phone calls and messages. As soon as you put an inquiry out, because of course they don't advertise how much their weekly costs are online. You need to send off an inquiry. So you do that, and then once they get your details, they just spam you. And, I work in sales day to day, and I hate the whole sales pitch and being super salesy. I don't know whether it's because I do that work, but I feel like even before that, I was sort of against it, and just it never really works with my personality type. So the more they not pressured, but, would send another message or try and call me, I was like, it's just, you're pushing me further away. Like, I do want to join a gym, but you're just pushing me away with your constant communications.
And speaking of pushing away, push away those other podcasts and subscribe to Homebrewed Premium. It's only $100 a week, and you get exclusive content, special pictures, and exclusive audio from Cameron and myself. We will send you one birthday message a year. Follow the link in the show notes. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
how was that? What
That's
do we think?
good. I think that's a new service we can start to offer people.
Yeah, Homebrewed Premium. Look it up. Coming to a store near you.
I mean, it sounded a little bit like a different service at first where you were going with that, exclusive pictures and whatnot. But let's let's move away from that.
Homely fans.
Homely. It works.
Look,
but
if this doesn't work out, we can pivot.
we're nothing but strong pivoters. I don't know. But anyway, let's get into the crux of what we're going to be talking about today, where there's a few different stories that we're going to run through. Which one do you want to start with?
Okay, I want to start with Robbie Williams because it's newsworthy. It's you probably have heard. Actually, you may not have heard about it during the week. It's kind of a weird little niche story, so maybe you haven't. Niche but national, I would say.
Yeah, I saw it pop up on my feeds, but I also think that's because my algorithms feed me that sort of content already. Because I had two interests. I had Robbie Williams and I had Formula One, which were obviously two ticks on the algorithm box for me. So I did get fed this story. I read it. I thought it was quite fascinating. So let's talk about it. Robbie Williams, you may remember, was meant to perform after the Formula One in Melbourne in 2020. So that Melbourne Grand Prix is traditionally the opening round, or as it has been the last few years, the third round on the calendar. So it's early in the season. It's typically sort of end of March, early April, which, as you may remember, that's when COVID really started to hit the fan in 2020. And what the Grand Prix organisers did was on the Friday morning, I believe it was, which was meant to be the first day of action on the track, they turned away the fans and said, sorry, the event's been cancelled.
Yes. This was like the tidal wave. You know when there's a tsunami, the tide draws really far out, like hundreds of meters to use all this water for this energy-filled wave. This was the tide drawing out before the tsunami that was COVID in Australia, I think, because no one really knew what was going on. And then they were rumouring the Grand Prix was going to be, and everyone was like, no, it won't. Grand Prix, everyone's down there, they're ready to go. It's a massive event.
It's impossible.
Yeah, and then they canned it. I just remember there was interviews with people at the front who were understandably unhappy and did not know what was coming, and they were like, it's just ridiculous, And so they pulled the pin on the Grand Prix.
Yeah, because part of the issues were, I think, one of the McLaren mechanics or people who actually worked with the teams started testing positive for COVID as well. So not only were they fearful of supporters' safety and their health, there was also, the teams and the crew and everyone there who were likely it was going to be a massive super spreader event. So they understandably pulled the pin, and the way that Victoria reacted throughout the whole pandemic as well, I think, was set quite early on with what happened at the Grand Prix around that. But because the Grand Prix got cancelled, it meant that there was no post-Grand Prix concert as was planned, and Robbie Williams was meant to be the performer after the concert, which got cancelled, but he's won a lot of money from in court over the cancellation.
The touring company has won a lot of money. I don't know how much ends back up in Robbie's hands, and this is another interesting little insight into how the industry works. But yes, Robbie Williams was going to play a concert post Grand Prix, and the organisers, when this message came through, they had to cancel the Grand Prix. They let Robbie know that the event, the music performance had to be cancelled as well. And it is that exact kind of notification and the text messages that were sent that has been the subject of a court case down in Victoria. And the long and short is the organisers of the Grand Prix have been ordered to pay a music touring company close to $3 million after the cancellation of the event. And as I said, the case hinged over these misleading text messages as they've been characterized.
It's the very specific wording in the messages, I think.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So the touring company alleged it was misled by race organisers who said a direction had been issued for the race and therefore the concert, and that's crucial, to be cancelled on March 13. The company argued that that was actually not the case, and the order covering the concert was not valid because a state of emergency had not yet been declared at that point. So they had ruled, and I think the chief health officer in Victoria had ruled that it was Dr. Brett Sutton actually, sorry, had ruled that the race couldn't go ahead, but it didn't actually apply to the gig that was scheduled for after that. And the Supreme Court of Victoria ruled that way, that the Grand Prix Corporation misrepresented one of Dr. Sutton's text messages while communicating with the touring company.
I think that it feels unethical, I think is the way that I'm feeling towards it, because if you flash back to the beginning of COVID, no one really knew what was going on. We're looking back with hindsight and saying, well, yeah, the cancellation of the Grand Prix was probably a good thing to try and avoid a very early super spreader event in Victoria and in the country. To then be going, oh, hang on, no, actually, the cancellation of the Grand Prix didn't actually include the cancellation of the gig, and therefore you owe us money for wrongly cancelling the gig because there was no state of emergency. One was then declared 2 or 3 days after the concert was meant to take place. So it was certainly, it wasn't months away before the emergency was declared. And I would think that if you are in a post-Grand Prix concert, surely it makes sense that if the Grand Prix is cancelled, the concert is also cancelled. Like, one only exists because of the other. Like, if one goes, the other goes. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's what it comes down to. And I think maybe you're being too kind to the Grand Prix organisers there, because I reckon they've gone, oh, shit, we're going to have to cancel the event itself. However, we're still probably going to have to hold this event afterwards, being the gig with Robbie Williams. No one's going to rock up because the Grand Prix has been cancelled, and we're still going to have to pay whatever has to be paid in order to actually put this on. That we might have to pay Robbie Williams. There might have been a clause in the contract saying we had to pay him. We had to pay him, to come here, and then there was a further for performance, and we don't have to pay X amount if he doesn't perform. So I reckon they just saw the whole event going up in smoke and went, well, we're not going to, fork out for this last little bit because it's hardly going to be worth it for us. And then they've kind of pulled the pin. I don't know. Maybe they were coming at it from a genuine public health perspective. But yeah, it was definitely a grey area. And the Justice Clyde Croft, who was ruling over that case, said that Brett Sutton, who was the Victorian Health Minister, did support the cancellation of the Robbie Williams concert, but he said any decision was ultimately up to the organisers. So Grand Prix cancelled, gig up to you. However, I would advise that you cancelled it. And I think when they've then gone and communicated that with the touring company, they've gone, yeah, look, he's said to cancel the performance from Robbie Williams as well.
So you don't think that the Grand Prix and the post Grand Prix performance are lumped in together with the same event? You're seeing them as two completely separate things.
Well, that's what it was legally at that point. So according to this case, they had to, the public health order applied to the Grand Prix, but the live performance it did not apply to. So they had to cancel the Grand Prix. They didn't have to cancel the gig afterwards for whatever reason.
See, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So the Brett Sutton was like, yep, Grand Prix cancelled, up to you about the live performance afterwards. And I think what made it stick even more was on the same night that event was cancelled, another outdoor concert with 8,000 fans went ahead at the Sydney Myer Music Bowl, which is also in Melbourne. So that wouldn't have been a very good look. And that obviously would have got, tails up from the Robbie Williams and the touring company camp straight away.
Yeah, but imagine if they cancelled the Grand Prix and then they're like, oh yeah, but the gig can still go ahead. Like, anyone who rocked up to the gates Friday morning for practice would have been, well, how come the gig can still go ahead, but the Grand Prix can't? Like, in my mind, they are all inclusive of the same event, and that event is the Grand Prix. Now, I'm not saying that's how it was legally interpreted, because obviously you've said that legally they were two separate events, but I would think it might be a false equivalency, but like a halftime grand final entertainment sort of thing. Like if the grand final gets cancelled, I'm not expecting the halftime show to continue, if that makes sense. Like it could be a false equivalency, but that's sort of how I'm viewing it, is that the concert and the race were all part of the Grand Prix experience in the one event.
Actually, you would think exactly that.
Ticketing wise, did you have to buy a separate ticket to go and see Robbie Williams in concert, or did your Grand Prix ticket get you access to the concert?
That's a wonderful question. So stand by, I'm actually just going to pause here. I've got the Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, because I'm just curious, if your Grand Prix ticket got you access to the Robbie Williams concert, then that would be further argument to say that it's all part of the one event.
So according to the ruling from the Supreme Court of Victoria from the horse's mouth, the event was set to be held alongside but separate to the 2020 Formula One Australian Grand Prix. This was initially to comprise of two concerts, the first on Friday 13th of March with Miley Cyrus headlining. I don't know what happened with Miley.
Jesus.
And second on Saturday 14th of March, headlined by Robbie Williams. Miley Cyrus cancelled her concert shortly before the event due to COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, the parties agreed to continue with a single Robbie Williams concert to be held on 14th of March 2020.
I wonder if them agreeing to it is also part of the argument against the Grand Prix and for, the touring company. About, well, we still agreed that even though COVID was happening, that we would go ahead.
So based off reading this, I would suggest there were two separate tickets, particularly when you have the Miley Cyrus one and they're over a couple of days. So the Supreme Court ruling, which we definitely didn't just have to stop and allow to read the summary of. The
power of editing, it was all done before we hit record.
The court also found, I'll start a paragraph back. The court found that the Grand Prix represented that both the 2020 Grand Prix and the Robbie Williams concert had been cancelled because Dr. Sutton, then Chief Health Officer of Victoria, had directed that both events could not proceed and that this representation was likely to mislead or deceive. The court found that Robbie Williams Group, whatever that touring company is, who aren't named, interestingly, relied on the representation. The court also found that in an email sent to the touring company on the Friday, they made a further representation that the advice given by Dr. Sutton extended to other activities in the area surrounding the Grand Prix and that this advice must be followed. It was found that this representation was contrary to a text message from Dr. Sutton earlier that day, which said the decision to cancel the concert was ultimately a matter for the organisers. And I'm sure in that he said, I would advise against it, but it's up to you. So basically they found that they'd breached different terms of a contract additionally as well. And the terms breach included a right for Robbie Williams to stage the event, or the touring company to stage the event, and a corresponding obligation for the Grand Prix to allow it to do so. An obligation for the Grand Prix to provide a venue for the gig that was fit for purpose, and an obligation to provide a copy of the written advice of the then Chief Health Officer of Victoria, Dr. Sutton. So not only did they, have that misleading communication, but they also had these obligations that were in a contract, and without that order, that binding order from a government body, then those obligations were meant to be fulfilled. So that's probably why we're seeing like $3 million as well, because they're gone bam, 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 bam. There's a few points. It's not just that you misled us, it's that you also had this obligation, and that obligation, there's probably revenue streams from the touring company coming because of that. All of it was denied, and they were essentially, someone took the piss a bit with the advice based on calculation the Grand Prix were making, and they just cancelled everything, although they didn't have to cancel the gig.
It's funny. We typically are on the same page with a lot of these views when we cover these stories. But I don't know. I still just look at that and think, based on everything that happened with the pandemic, it feels like they're just, I don't know. It feels like they're just being assholes about it. You know how you can just sort of be like, oh, we're going to do this because we can, and then we can get lots of money out of it. But you're of the mindset that the Grand Prix sort of took advantage of, I guess they themselves were the ones being arseholes and taking the piss and not allowing the concert to go ahead because they feared for a low turnout.
Look, that's just my speculation, and I'm cynical. I think both are being arseholes, so I agree with your assessment that it's probably a bit of an arsehole move to do this, knowing what transpired afterwards. You know, that maybe that's one that you go, all right, guys, we'll just let that one be. However, maybe there was an insurance claim on their end, and the insurer was like, can you provide this? And then they tried to get the bona fide advice from the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix didn't provide it, and that's how this all unraveled, maybe. But I think the Grand Prix were looking at this going, we've cancelled everything else. We're going to have to foot X amount of, like, I don't know. I don't have enough faith in, you know,
Anyone.
profit-making enterprises, to think they were really, really caring about public health when they did this, especially how early days it was. We didn't really know the extent of what would come after that. I think they were just looking at that going, look, it's a lot easier for us to just cancel everything, just tell them that it's all canned. That's what Dr. Sutton said. They can pack up and head home, and we can just cancel the whole lot rather than cancelling, you know, the race, but keeping the concert. We don't think people are going to rock up. It's going to cost us money, et cetera, et cetera. And then, as you say, yes, down the track, this touring company have gone, well, here's a chance for us to make some more money. It's in the same way the Grand Prix, I think, were like, here's a chance for us to save some money back then. And then they've just come through with this ridiculous lawsuit and got $3 million out of it. So maybe it's not so ridiculous. I don't know.
Well, you're probably right. I think there's wrongs potentially on both sides. I just feel like I think the Grand Prix were justified in cancelling everything. And I think that they did make the correct call. It didn't feel like it at the time, but looking back on it, I feel like, yeah, they definitely made the right call in cancelling all events. But obviously, whether they made the right call or not doesn't really differ what their contractual obligations and legally what they had to do around it. So, look, I can understand both perspectives, but I feel like I have I don't know. I was going to say more sympathy towards the organisers for canning it because of just how much unknown there was and just the short turnaround that everyone was there. Everyone was ready to go, and then they're like, no, sorry. Like, that would have been a massive call to make. And like I say, I think it was the right one in hindsight. Yeah,
I think it's indisputable that it was definitely the right call to make from a public health perspective. But yeah, I guess it's a question of why or whether that was made for that reason. But either way, this is where it's landed. So $3 million from the Grand Prix, which I don't imagine that, Cam, you're a Grand Prix guy, I don't imagine they're short of a quid. Seems like there's a lot of money in that sport.
Yeah, Formula One's a very wealthy sport. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I don't imagine they're short of a quid there. So $3 million goes to the unnamed touring company. How much of that goes to Robbie Williams or how that worked out, we're unsure. But what it did reveal when we were kind of speaking about this off mic before we started was just how much money there is in like, I suppose, these kind of arrangements, and you know, like, I suppose the stakes, and then also how this works. Like, the touring company is almost like a label for the tour in this instance. It's not Robbie Williams himself making personal representations to a court or even, you know, like a company that is his. It's the touring company. Whether he's kind of cut into the settlement, we're not sure.
I'll tell you what, though, if Robbie Williams isn't included as part of this cut, your cynical brain just continues to evolve and tick over and go, well, okay, why isn't the artist getting any benefit from this? And then, yeah, did the artist pursue the suit a little bit further and get the touring company to do it? Or the touring company said, hey, Robbie, I think we might be able to get some money out of this? Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know, and I doubt we ever will. But it is interesting just seeing how the money moves and how much there actually was tied up in this. I don't know what Robbie Williams was being paid.
That's what I want to know too.
And what it made me think about as well was, fast forward now, so we had Robbie Williams and Miley Cyrus, two international artists playing at a big sporting event in Melbourne. Maybe at least one of those spots could have gone to a big Aussie artist. Perhaps, you know, being an international event, they thought it was necessary. And it just made me think as well about the AFL Grand Final. We haven't covered this in the music news even though it was announced a few weeks ago, but it just started my mind there that for the 2024 edition, Katy Perry is going to be performing at the AFL Grand Final in Victoria. So another big international sports star playing at a showpiece event in Melbourne. But this time, it is the most Australian sport that we have. There is no more Australian sport than AFL, I would argue. Cricket, no, it's AFL. It's the most Australian sport that there is. And they've got Katy Perry coming in. I don't know how much they're paying her, but maybe this gives us some kind of insight. Again, the AFL not short of a quid. She would command a pretty high price and come with an entourage and a whole lot of kind of requirements. And so we've got Katy Perry coming in to play the AFL Grand Final in 2024. She's 39 years old, no shade, but she's definitely not at the height of her influence either. I just thought it was very curious. Why is Katy Perry playing it?
It's a very valid question. I mean, she's, I guess, making somewhat of a comeback. I think she has a new album coming out soon or has already dropped, or I don't know the specifics around it. I just remember there was a little bit of hype that Katy Perry was supposedly making a bit of a comeback. But I just think if you're putting on a grand final, everyone is going to the game for the grand final. It is not the Super Bowl where people are tuning in for the ads and the halftime show. People are going because they want to see, hopefully, the Swans win the grand final. Not that anyone in Melbourne will probably want that. But the point is people are going there to watch the game of footy. Who you have as a halftime entertainment, for me, if I had tickets to a grand final, the grand final entertainment isn't necessarily making me want to go to a grand final more or less. It's more just, am I going to enjoy the halftime show? If not, doesn't really matter too much. I'm not paying any extra for the halftime show. It's just on a halftime when I can go to the toilet and get some food or whatever, if I don't really want to watch the performance. I think with that mindset, it just makes complete sense to have a local Australian musician performing at halftime because it's 100,000 people at the MCG plus the millions watching on TV. I think the concert thing's half time is shown across the telly.
No, I think, actually, it's before,
it is,
which I thought was halftime as well.
You're right.
It's a pre-game.
I was just having the same thought. It is always pre-game, which I'm pretty sure it's televised majority of the time, or at least part of it is televised. So you got millions on TV plus 100,000 actually at the MCG who are there to watch the footy. They're not there to see a concert. So if you can give that exposure to an Australian artist who they are likely to know and like just as much, if not more, than a Katy Perry coming along. Again, no shade on Katy Perry, but in the past, they've had the Killers perform at the AFL Grand Final look, I've seen them live. I think they're a fantastic live act, but there are also some fantastic live Australian musicians who would love that spot as well. And as you said, it's an Australian sport. It should be a staple that we have Australians performing on big Australian occasions. And it's these sorts of decisions that we keep butting our head against the wall going, how come the Aussies aren't doing well overseas? How come the Aussies aren't selling out festivals? Because 100,000 people at the MCG aren't seeing them play 15 minutes pre-game at the G and go, oh, they were actually pretty good. Let's look into their music. Oh, look, they're playing at a festival down the road. Let's go check them out as well. Like, these are the roll-on effects that happen when you give someone the exposure at the MCG, as opposed to going, hey, Katy Perry, who was relevant 15 years ago, how would you like to perform? And presumably charge more money than a local artist would too.
It would. Ed. Like, you got to fly this person over, like, from the other side of the world with a whole team. And then, a choreographed show and whatever else is going to come along with it. And I understand they want a showpiece event, but I just thought it was ridiculous when I first heard it. I just thought, what?
Yeah,
Katy Perry
also,
at the AFL Grand Final. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that Katy Perry is playing. I'm sure there's some people that will care. That's maybe a broad brush. But I mean, as you said, people don't go for the music. And I'm actually glad at least that this performance is pre-game as we cleared up and not half-time, because I do remember A-League Grand Final where the Mariners won 6-1. Cam, you and I were there together. The Mashton Kutcher was there, and it was just this like rushed, frenetic, scrambled performance. I like Mashton Kutcher. I respect as an artist, and he did a great job with what time he had. But I was like, what are you doing? I just want to sit here and be nervous or think about the game. Like, this is a bit too much for me. but before makes a lot more sense. But can you imagine like a Betty Ray's, or I don't know, like let's go into that just Australian
how good would Betty Ray's be?
Kind of feel to it. That would just pump everybody up. It would get attention. It would cost the league less. And in a year where we have lost so much in terms of cancellations and so much exposure and opportunity for exposure for artists has been stripped away, this would have been a really good way to kind of stack a weight on the other side, you know, and kind of try and bring a little bit of balance. I mean, it wouldn't correct it entirely, but you are giving, you know, 15, 20 minutes exposure in front of millions of people across Australia to a local band who I'm sure people could connect with more than they could Katy Perry and would probably remember more. But the AFL and their infinite wisdom have gone, I know who we need, Katy Perry. And I was just like, what are you doing?
What would make more to that connection point too, if you have a local artist, there is a chance that they follow a team in the AFL or NRL, whichever, you know, code we want to be talking about. There's a chance they follow a team. Like last year, G-Flip performed at the pre-game show, and G-Flip wore, was it Collingwood? And Collingwood were at the grand final. So, of course, if you're a Collingwood supporter, you see G-Flip wearing a Collingwood scarf, you're going to go, let's give this artist a bit more of a go, as opposed to Jason Derulo wearing a half Wanderers Brisbane Raw jersey. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like there's a chance that they're going to have a support one of the teams, and if they do, that connection will be made even stronger.
Yeah. Also, even, I don't know, you just imagine King Stingray, like a King Stingray, because we know that the AFL has, you know, strong Indigenous links, a lot of Indigenous players, and the origins of the game are actually linked back to the Koori game of Man Grook, which existed pre-invasion colonisation. We know that was the case. So imagine a King Stingray performance. That would just feel so right. It would feel so fitting. And they just play mesmerising music. I can't imagine people would have an issue with that. And yet, yes, again, we've gone with an ageing international expensive pop star.
Who I've never seen live personally, but I've seen, like, Katy Perry performed halftime at the Super Bowl, I don't know, however many years ago. And recently when we were watching, I was away over the weekend with family and we were just watching halftime Super Bowl shows. We watched, you know, the Eminem Dr. Dre one. We watched a bunch of them. One of them was Katy Perry's. And I thought, just, I don't know, felt flat to me. And that's like Super Bowl, which is one of the biggest potential concerts you can put on throughout a year, and if Katy Perry was flat for that, like, I don't know, it just feels, I'm not trying to throw shade at Katy Perry or shade at international artists, and maybe it just comes down to the fact that I'm not a massive fan of Katy Perry's music. Like I mentioned the Killers before, if they're performing at halftime, I might have a different opinion about it because I think that they are a worthwhile investment. Maybe that's part of it, but everything that we said about Australian artists getting the exposure and the connection they can make, and you know, a chance for them to perform on that stage, all of that is still true, regardless of whether I like the international artist or not.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's just, I don't know. It's just that same thing, as you said, we bang our heads against the wall. It's the same, you know, like the Coles radio thing. There's simple things where these that we've spoken about a lot, where the bodies and institutions that are capable of creating change and are actually responsible for influence in this country, like our leading sporting institutions, like our media, like our supermarkets, you know, whatever, they have this role that they could play in promoting our local stuff, and they choose not to, often to their own detriment, it seems, often to greater expense and less exposure, you know, unless the AFL are trying to make a play international like the NRL have. I don't know. It just seems like there was a much easier option that they haven't taken. And then, you know, likewise with the Grand Prix, I doubt they'd be paying out Betty Ray's $3 million if they'd cancelled their gig ahead of time. No, I do understand it a bit more with the Grand Prix being an international event, but it is a similar thing. I mean, we had two artists there playing that could have been, at least one of them could have been a really big, you know, maybe not a Betty Ray's, even bigger, like a Tame Impala or somebody playing the Grand Prix, someone with that international appeal. And again, they did that, and I don't know, it's given us this to talk about. So,
but even the Grand Prix, And I mean, different extents, I guess. I guess Robbie Williams and Miley Cyrus were proper concerts, not just performing, I guess, in and around the Grand Prix. But Peking Duck have played at the Grand Prix a number of times. And I remember, it must have been that 2021, we were interviewed an Australian artist ahead of the Grand Prix. And we were like, oh, just pretend like you've just performed at the Grand Prix over the weekend for the radio show. And then it got cancelled, so they never performed. So we had to cut that part of the interview. But like the Grand Prix do have a history of giving Aussie artists a crack, as well as, despite, as you mentioned, being an international event. Like they're only in Australia for 1 out of the 20 odd races that they have. The AFL have every single game, bar maybe a couple if they try to expand into Papua New Guinea or America or somewhere else. But they're an Australian sport. Give the Aussie artists a crack.
Yeah, so we will give the Grand Prix a little pass here. And then, sorry you had to pay $3 million. You probably shouldn't have lied or misled, as the court ruled. But the AFL, pull your head in. All eyes are now on the NRL. I looked it up before. They haven't actually released anything about what's going to happen for the NRL Grand Final, apart from the fact that it's going to be in Sydney. But there's been a lot of chatter in circles about whether they should take the lead and invest in someone huge to blow a core stadium's roof off, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, nothing is set in stone yet. So we know that Peter V'landys does listen to the podcast quite religiously, actually. He sends us a lot of emails. Anyway, I've had to consider legal action, but that's another thing. Peter V'landys emails us a lot. No, not really. But, yeah, if the NRL are listening, which they're not, just don't do what the AFL did.
You never know. Peter V'landys has connections.
You never know.
He might know someone in the NRL who can get this sorted. But you mentioned Betty Rays. They would be awesome in that Stadium Rock arena. Like, I remember Gang of Youths performed at the NRL Grand Final, and we've spoken about this years ago when we did the radio show, but a lot of people were like, oh, who are these guys? Where's Cole Chisel? And it's like, guys, how many years in a row do we need Jimmy Barnes and Jess Mowboy to perform at the NRL Grand Final? Like, surely we can give some of these, like Betty Rays, King Stingray, like all these bands, or, even individual artists. Like, it doesn't have to be a band. We can have anyone performing, but let's preferably make them Australian and local, and we'll probably have the exact same. Let's just copy paste this. And this time next year, we can probably have the exact same conversation, but just replace Katy Perry with insert international artist here.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, and we'll just keep banging heads against the wall. I mean, it's given us, half an hour to discuss it, so we've got to thank him for the content, I guess. But it is a bit maddening sometimes to look at these things and be like, what is going on? Why are you like this? But I actually wanted to pivot to we have missed a memorial. We haven't memorialized something super important, and we keep forgetting to do it.
I wanted to start the episode
so we have to do
with
it
this
now,
because obviously it comes in with the iconic "Gentlemen, this is Democracy" manifest. And I wanted the first thing that you heard at the beginning of this episode to be a tribute to the legend himself. But we got sidetracked talking about how our day had been.
Much more interesting. But yeah, we do have a memorial, or a memoriam, I don't know, an honorary memorial to give to Jack Carlson, who is the Democracy Manifest guy. And this is the last time we'll probably actually tell you to do this. But if you haven't, look up the video.
I'm sure you saw it. And even if you hadn't seen it, you would have seen it pop up on your feed, or someone if they're a good friend, would have shared it to you on that day, and you got to witness why everyone was paying tribute to Jack, because Australian icon, absolutely. And ever since we formed the music news, effectively, he was the soundtrack to our intro with Democracy Manifest, and then we ended our radio shows with Ta-Ta Farewell, and he's sort of, being a part of Homebrewed and everything that we've done. So, yeah, when we heard the news of his passing, which was now, over a month ago, Yeah, we were quite sad, and we were exchanging messages, paying tribute to him.
Yeah, just for context, like about 50%, if not more, of the phone calls that Cam and I have, we sign off with a ta-ta and farewell just personally to one another.
I would say
so that's the measure of his influence.
way more than 50%.
I reckon definitely it's the majority. It's more than not.
Yeah, so we often answer the phone howdy doody, as again paying tribute to our radio intro, and we always end with ta-ta farewell. It's just
we do. It's folklore. We're on brand all the time. We're never off. You know, the way we converse here is the way we converse.
If you see us doing our grocery shopping,
there's a Jack in the Box.
Yeah, if you know we're doing a grocery shopping or I'm walking down the street, I won't say hi. I'll say howdy doody, and then if I'm leaving a party, I'll say ta-ta farewell
every single time. But yeah, rest in peace, Jack Carlson. I think it's genuinely like, to via that video so firmly entrench yourself into a nation's culture is something that is insane. And that, I mean, we are about music and arts broadly here, specifically on the music news, and what he did there has, whether he intended it to be or not, and I think he did, because it was a bit that he was doing at the time, like that was kind of his thing. But he's contributed this piece of art to Australian culture that has endured through generations. I mean, we're like 40, 50 years on from when it actually occurred, and it's as relevant as ever. And the nation mourned when he died, like you know, not quite on like the Steve Irwin level, but on a national scale. It was news. Everybody was like, oh my God. Everybody felt a bit of sadness and reflected on his contribution. I think it's a pretty amazing thing to have done, to have so firmly entrenched yourself in the culture of a nation via that one video. And then he just went into his normal life and kind of resurfaced only several years ago.
Yeah, you talked about artistry. He actually became an artist and was painting to raise some funds to help with his treatments and all of that as well. But I think the day that he passed, a lot of Chinese restaurants were very busy as everyone enjoyed a succulent Chinese meal in tribute.
As they should have. So rest in peace, Jack Carlson, and rest in peace to this edition of the Music News.
Yeah. Tell you what, it is rough to segue out of talking about, you know, mourning and someone passing to then go, by the way, guys, that's it for this one. Make sure you follow for more, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. You know, we'll be back for another music news next week. Eddie's a hard segue. We're normally pretty good at segues, and Eddie's hard. That's hard.
It is hard. I guess, you know, maybe this episode will be pulled because we'll get cease and desist from Katy Perry and Peter Volandis.
I was going to say Peter Volandis, yeah.
Everyone else who we insulted along the way.
Unnamed touring company.
But either way, but if you did like it, we have spoken about these things in various capacities in the past. You can find it all on www.homebrewed.au. Like, share, subscribe, and follow us on all of the places where you follow people.
Yeah.
You know, those places.
And let your PI know where we are too, so they can follow us.
Yes, please. We're actually not being stalked enough. That's our problem. We've had
no one's keeping us in check.
We want to be successful enough where we're being stalked.
Yeah, that's how we know we've made it. But at the moment, I'm currently very peaceful in my own house. I'm not worrying about someone following me home. So once we get to that level, no, I'm good. Don't want that to happen. I'm joking, please. Do not find out where we live. Thankfully, it's a very generic white background for any video clips that we put up as a result of this. So it's very generic. Who knows where I am?
I don't know. The internet sleuths are pretty good. I've listened to some things on geolocating online. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Ta-ta, farewell. Catch us homebrewed.au or Homebrewed Media, wherever you find social stuff. If you did enjoy this rambling, we do other rambling, usually with artists of music on the Central Coast quite often. Although our last one was with Mercy Mercy, very funny chat. And next one is with Wafia. So two national and international appeal artists will be rolling through the Homebrewed doors over the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. And my name's Cam.
And I'm Eamon. I'd like to think that was someone's first episode, and because we never really say who we are. Like, we just sort of assume at this point that people, or maybe I'll go, oh, Eamonn, what do you think? So that people can clue off that. But I do like the thought that someone heard that right at the end and was like, oh, so that guy is Eamonn.
I actually have wondered whether we should. Oh, God. Sorry, whether we should, like, introduce ourselves more and do more of that ID stuff. I don't really know.
Nah. We're fine.
Ta-ta and farewell.